So thank you all for coming back. We've had an exciting morning, and I think what will happen this afternoon is that a lot of the threads that we've been talking about earlier today will all sort of coalesce in our program this afternoon. So thanks for joining us again. My name's Philip Kent, and I'm a member of the IFLA Library Buildings and Equipment section, and I'm also the University Librarian here at the University of Sydney. And I've been delighted with Margie to be co-host of a festival of our Library Buildings and Equipment section with our colleagues here from all around the world this week. In planning for our program today, we really, on the one hand, wanted to provide our IFLA colleagues from overseas with an authentic and distinctive experience in this region. And also in terms of you, our colleagues here in Australia, we wanted to share their knowledge and information with you as well in putting together the program. And so that's why this morning we had a world view, and we got off to a really good start with Annie sort of covering the whole world, which was amazing. But also what we wanted to do is that, and I know there's great interest in this audience from talking about, you know, the distinctive Australian issues that we're dealing with in this post-colonial world, and what we should be doing here in terms of library design and indeed in library services writ large. So we were lucky too that we have some people on our committee and very good friends, our cousins across the ditch in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And so we had no trouble putting together a program about what's happening in Australia and New Zealand. We had hoped to include Canada, and we do have Canadian colleagues, but because of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which Annie referenced this morning, there are big changes coming in Canada as well, with very strong legislative background to them. But I'm sorry that we don't have any papers this afternoon on Canada at this time. But I think we've got more than enough to have a jolly good conversation this afternoon. And who better to start that conversation for us is, I need to move is Shannon. Thanks, Sylvia. So Annie referenced Shannon a couple of times this morning, so I don't need to say much more. And as you know, we've got bios and you've got access to them as well. But just to say that Shannon is a Dharawal keeper, knowledge keeper. And she also has, throughout her career, been involved as an interdisciplinary creative practitioner. And I think she's, by reputation, an effective agent of change in education and in design of spaces. So, and also in the course of this morning, we had a couple of passing references to the Connecting with Country. And then this is a New South Wales initiative and led by the New South Wales architect, and guidance for people that are embarking on projects like this. And who better to talk to us this afternoon is Shannon, because Shannon was involved and lobbied and created and helped build those standards. And I think you're also on the advisory board going forward. So without any more from me, we'll hand over to Shannon because she's got so much to tell. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Philip. Can everybody hear me? Is it all right? Okay, good. Thank you. That was like, I feel like I may let you walk down and not be as great as I'm sure Annie speaks so beautifully about Bangawarra. And Philip, thank you so much. Where do I even begin? I want to talk to everybody. So I've got a roaming mic, which is good. And I do apologize. I'm recovering from, I'm not contagious in any way. I don't have COVID, been tested, and but I just have a lingering, your lungs they don't seem to want to let up after you've been unwell. So, and I definitely don't want to neglect this side over here either, because you're actually sitting in a beautiful place to talk about education. And I'm not actually talking about the Sandstone Academy. I'm talking about under the Port Jackson figs over here. So these beautiful figs are what we call damu. Very good, Annie. I should have tested you on that, shouldn't I? I knew you'd know that. And they're a learning tree. And so the idea is if they weren't placed together so closely, they would grow in a beautiful canopy where the branches would actually come down and touch the ground. So country would create literally a classroom for you. And so that's where we would sit and tell stories, and it makes a perfect, I guess, sort of a buffer so that you're not being distracted with the outside world. Kids can climb in the trees, they can sit how they like, they can lay, they can, move around if they need to. But it's an incredibly important part of our story and our culture, and then that weaves in with a whole lot of other things. So hopefully we'll end up back at the Port Jackson fig, but I guess I'd like to begin by saying a very heartfelt welcome to you all here on this beautiful country that my ancestors have walked for tens of thousands of years. And a very large part of the whole connecting with country framework and the work that I do and the work that we all do as my family is about being seen, undoing the erasure, undoing the silencing of what's occurred. And I was raised in the perfect silent era of what we call colonization in Australia. But I guess I should probably begin by saying Wadeo Galambang, which is welcome to this beautiful sacred country. We know this country is a freshwater country. There's a beautiful spring that pops up just not far from here. Victoria Park, where am I? No, that way. Yeah, see, I don't know. Once you put these walls around, you don't know anymore, right? But just because those walls there doesn't mean that country is not still here. Okay, country, and I'm going to go through my slides, which I've been instructed because, of course, designers have to complicate things, and we have to go into. Oh, hello. That's our next. Kia ora. To any, and also I've sort of messed up my welcome in a way, but I should definitely say. So I'm a Dharawal Eora woman. Eora being from this place here. And I have come from a long line of amazing people. I'll show you a little snippet of that. Positioning is an incredibly important part of our world as Indigenous peoples. Knowing who you are, what you bring to the table, why you want to talk to us, and what are your intentions for the future with what knowledge we share with you. Because we come from a very long and dark history of research that's been extractive, knowledges that have been used against us. The list goes on and on. I don't really want to, focus on those negative aspects of what's occurred in the past, but other than to say that there's a better way forward. And part of that is how we do our work. And it's a different kind of way of working. It can be conflicting with budgets and schedules, but the outcome is so worth it. And it's not, what can I say? It's not an invaluable way of working and an invaluable set of outcomes that can actually, we try to focus on what we consider country, community, but necessarily commerce as well. It has to be there. It has to fund what we need the projects to do. And I'm going to keep talking. I'll probably show pictures because it's going to explain it a lot better. I'm kind of super excited to be here, so I'm scattered all over the place. And it was such a beautiful welcome. It's very overwhelming. This is my grandfather. So this is Fred Foster. And he was a snake man from down La Perouse. I tell you this, the parts of the reasons why I've been telling these stories for so long is, obviously I'm a very white passing Indigenous woman. And I think that people think that my culture and my stories are way back when and, very detached or dispossessed. I've been told all my life we're extinct, that there's no Aboriginal people in Sydney, everyone's in Alice Springs. I've heard it all, every single thing. And if anyone's got any curly questions that they'd like to ask, I'm the person to ask because I'd prefer you ask me than anybody out there in the big wide world, and you might either get the wrong end of the whole situation or they might or whatever, but I will not be offended. You can say you're asking for a friend. It's all good. I don't mind. now's the time to ask questions, because I'm an educator at heart, is where I really came from. I have a visual arts background. I did my postgraduate here at Sydney Uni. I did a postgraduate in education. It was one of the last years of the diploma. So I squeezed it in 1 year, which was brilliant. But I loved it. I loved being here. It was such a great university to be in. And it was the very first time. I was 22 at the time. And there was an Indigenous Studies course. And it was the very first time ever in my formal education that somebody looked at me and said, "Who are you? You're Aboriginal, aren't you? You're mob." And I said, "Yeah, how did you know?" And it's like, not ever once before in my entire life. And all my teachers knew that I was Aboriginal. They all saw my dad, and I'll show you my dad. Do we flick through that way? Here's my dad. That's my dad and me down there. Like, there's no denying it. But in the middle of Sydney, and I live on sort of the outskirts of Bankstown on the Georges River in a little place called Panania, which is apparently an Aboriginal word that means sun rising and shining on the hills. But I think it's a desert word, because the missionaries were known to bring desert words into Sydney and to mix up all the cultural different, you know, things that were going on around all the different missions. Sorry, I don't want to digress. So this is my family, amazing people. Top left, my great-great-grandmother Kate lives in the Boneton government boat sheds. She's in very early colonial notes. We have apical ancestors that go way back. We know who they are. We have native title type situations right up and down the coast through my family, right down to the Victorian border and right up through Newcastle and, you know, right up that way of Foster and Tuncurry and that. So we're legit. And this has been a lifelong learning for me, and everything that I share and I do involves everything that I've ever learned, from all the walks I've done, all the talks I've done, all the information that's carried down through my father, my aunties, my uncles, everybody. I could talk for hours, days, months, weeks, years about these people. They did an opening. My great grandfather did an opening for the a corroboree for the opening of the Harbour Bridge. He was, and my great grandmother were part of the 1938 Day of Mourning. It just goes on and on. I can't tell you how amazing these people are. And so a lot of my work is about continuing the story, because from this point where Tom died and Fred was still working as well, but around, you know, 40s, 50s, 60s, everything just went quiet. And, you know, when Bill Stanner said, "Oh, you know, the silent apartheid and it shall end here," and all this, it didn't end there. It just got worse. Anyway, so a lot of what I do and connecting with country is about showcasing, bringing to the fore, bringing back country and what it really means, and the values of country, the cultural aspects of country. And I'm not, using words isn't going to explain that, so I'm going to jump ahead. This is the other half of wonderful Bangawarra, which is Jo Patterson-Kinniburgh. She's an architect and design professional and has been teaching through UTS for a zillion years. Brilliant person. So she brings the architecture to the table and that design and governance story. And she's also Indigenous. She's a descendant of Kariaku slave. She actually, interestingly, grew up and was raised in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And so she saw there what was happening and how everything was working there, and came to Australia working in the built environment and went, "What's going on here? There's no mention of anything before the architect arrives or somebody raises the thing to the ground and there's a block of concrete." So everything kind of started, you might say, "Oh, Aboriginal people used to use canoes here." And that was sort of it. And then it had jumped straight into, so this, you know, suburb was gazetted at whatever. We met at the zoo, and I don't mean UTS. We literally were, I was doing the bird show at the zoo and she saw me and was like, "Oh, I need someone just like you to talk." And so we started working together. I'll try and, so what we really do is showcase country. I'm going to jump all over the place. Sorry about that. Country, and here we're looking at like ideas around, so where we are right now, and I was going to explain that about country. So you'll hear that it's called the Gadigal country, Eora Nation, which it's better than nothing. But I'll say that. And I don't want to put anybody down or disparage anything, but research has come a long way. And we've now got traditional owners here doing this. A lot of the knowledge that's out there wasn't done by traditional owners. It's a lot done by places and people that don't necessarily understand the full mechanics of culture and language. So Gadigal describes the Gadi, which is from the Gulgadi, which is the Gadi tree, the beautiful grass trees out the front of the building here. Gorgeous. It's the only place in Sydney you can find grass trees. And yet they call it Gadi country. That's so strange. Is that not odd? You go to Western Australia and Perth and the plains covered in them. And they are one of the most important plants here. And if you go to the natural spaces, go to North Head or anywhere like that, you'll see the grass trees everywhere. Or the gaddy, gul gaddy. So gaddy is actually the flower spike. And the flower spike is used as a spear when you're fishing off the rocks around saltwater country. And that is as a very specific country is named for very specific meanings of, you know, what's local here, what's being done here in this very spot. So where you fish from the rocks and you use that spear floats because it's actually a fibrous, it's gone woody in its sort of old age, if you know what I mean, and it floats. So if you miss your fish, you get your spear back. So it makes perfect sense, right? So that's gaddy country. When you put a gal on the end, you're referring to the men. So when you say, welcome, or Wadeo Gaddy Gal, you're saying welcome to the men of gaddy country. And I'm a bit against that because Gallian is women, gaddy Gallian is women. And so I always like to say gaddy Koorero or gaddy country. I try not to make it genderized. But also it's not salt water here and there's no rocks and there's no fishing from the rocks with the spears. When Europeans named our country, they went around the waterways. So you look at all the old European maps and you'll see everything named around the waterways, but nothing for places like this here, where they couldn't bring their boats up the waterways because they were too small and narrow. And so what we need to do is then let's have a look at what country is here. You know, erase all of the concrete, the steel, the sandstone, everything, and let's have a look at country. And what country here is fresh water. There are springs. There's a massive aquifer under this land here, 20 kilometres long. Beautiful spring water popping up in little spaces all over. There's a lot of, so we're at the top of an escarpment here that runs down to saltwater country, which we now know as Blackwattle Bay, and spaces like that. Even though it wasn't blackwattles that were there, it was Giruing, which is a Callichroma serratifolia, but it got, do you see how I could just talk and talk? And everything, I think what we need to learn from this mostly is that everything is connected. It's so incredibly hard to talk about one little thing and not go down all these rabbit holes and rabbit warrens, and I do it a lot. So somebody needs to tell me when we're getting close to the end of my time. So freshwater country, Natagurad, and women's law around freshwater is incredibly strict. It's about administering the freshwater and making sure there's always enough for medicines, for birthing, for everyday use. And you'd have to ask permission for water, to use water in any kind of larger context. And so it's really important what's going on here in these spaces. There was noted that there was a kangaroo ground here as well, because it was kind of on top of, as you start to get to the top of the ridge, you get those areas of grassland. So long story short, it's not really Gadigal country up here. And there's women as well. So we should acknowledge that. But country is what we try to showcase in everything. And country's still here even when this is actually the end of the line for the fresh water that runs from here down to the salt water. This is like around the site of the now Powerhouse Museum and the railway yards and whatnot. And there's some little spots down there where if you walk through, you can still smell the mangroves and the mud. Because where the fresh water meets the salt water, depending on how vast the landscape is there, as fresh meets salt, it makes a brand new ecology. And that is amazing sort of philosophy and principle and value of country, is the ways in which country brings very diverse elements together to create a brand new space. And it's that brand new space that has its own intrinsic value and qualities that you can bring into these spaces that we're creating. So thinking about things like community spaces, libraries, and all of the diverse and vastly, you know, I guess, different things that need to come together and work peacefully together. So we have a look at how do we create these like interstitial zones and modular kind of spaces that can respond to whether it's high tide or low tide. Sometimes it's very full, sometimes it's very empty. Sometimes you need something for 2 people, sometimes you need something for 100 people or more. And so we look at country and we think, how does country deal with this? You know, what are the adaptations? What goes on in this interstitial zone? Here in Sydney, you'll see that there's mangroves, there's mud, you know, the silt washes in and it mixes, you get the brackish water and you get this fertile environment that is perfect for the very beginnings of life in the saltwater system. So it's where the crabs spawn, and that, like on a king tide and a big moon, that's where the sort of the cycle, it's almost like as if there was it's a beginning point, that's where it would happen, because the crabs spawn, the fish come out, the eels, the birds, they all feed from the spawn, and it just goes on, and this whole cycle begins and starts churning. And these very small parts of our ecology, and that's another point I need to say, is our ecology, because we're part of this. We are part of country. We are of country. It means that these very small parts, like the babies, the organisms, can survive without being predated upon by larger species and things. Now, I'm sort of going off down the country tangent, and then I'm just going to keep trying to bring it back to how does that then is reflected in space. We talk about the spatial implications of country. That's some of our design lingo I've picked up in the last few years. It's probably going to be mentioned in here, actually. This was an interesting project about how do you bring the ancient knowledges and contemporary knowledges and, European, this sort of a whole different world together and showcase these stories. And that's what I love most about doing this work, is that we get to showcase phenomenal stories and that we get to bring these to the fore. We've been told to be quiet for so many years. So this is quite extraordinary now to be sought out to do these talks to people who have, it's so much opportunity to make great change and do big things. So this is the story of my great-grandfather doing the corroboree for the opening of the Harbour Bridge. Not far from there, right? This is like a part of the point where, and this is my great-grandfather. I probably should use the cuss. Oh, I've got a pointy thing, have I? I do. There. Where is he? Where he's holding up. There he is. His boomerang there. So you can see he's got his fingers in his mouth playing the gum leaf. Anyway, it's a brilliant story, and I've heard this story all my life, but I didn't know it actually happened. Where is he? There he is. And I thought my family was just pulling my leg. And they're talking about how cranky all the men were, and somebody else walked out in front of them, and blah, blah, blah. And I'd never seen I'd only had a photo after he'd done the corroboree. And then one day this pops up from Fairfax, and this is out of the archives. You don't know what you've got in your boxes. Please go through all the boxes you've got in your libraries and in your spaces. You never know what you've got there, especially the local history sections and things. Oh gosh, it's phenomenal. Anyway, so this was about just close to there in the harbour is a space called Bumatjuril, which is a healing space for Paradawi, the eel, and Buambali, the grey nurse shark. And so we're combining all of these stories in together and over to the left there is a place called Guraigon, which is like a healing space for Raigon, the seahorse. And in amongst this project that we were doing, and which was part of the Blackwattle Bay master plan that we worked on, was they found in another spot, Toon Bays West, they found this whole community of threatened and they thought extinct white seahorse. And so this whole part of the story, now that's being carried on by Alison Page, another wonderful Aboriginal woman who is creating this public art around shopping trolleys, recycled shopping trolleys to make habitat. Seahorses love shopping trolleys. Did you know that? There's lots of spaces to hang on to, right? I'm just rambling now about everything, right? You're just going to get it all. And so there's public art that breaches the water, but underneath the water is habitat. And it all started because we were looking around this area and going, what's here? I know there's an ancestral story from there and an ancestral story from there. The seahorse, Raigon, is all about if somebody drowns in the water and we can't retrieve their body, Raigon goes and saves and takes their spirit to the other side. And so Guraigon, which is, I believe it's called Clark Island now, is the island that is where you celebrate and have ceremonies for Guraigon. So that's where Raigon takes the spirits. And then it just goes on because part of the story is Kate, my great-great-grandmother, who lived in the abandoned government boat sheds. Her son, little boy, drowned in the water there. And so there's this whole, it's so complex and interwoven with ancestral stories, contemporary stories, early colonial stories and notes. It's just this beautiful integrated mishmash. It's sad and it's difficult, but there's so much in there that then we can bring forward. So we sort of are trying to identify these stories and ideas and concepts that have never been heard before in some cases, and that we can't imagine because we have all this concrete and everything everywhere, right? And we can't imagine there's anything actually happening there. Did you show this today? Yeah. not that one. Also, this is from Rhiannon did this. This is the cutaway. And combining cultural knowledge with these beautiful ways of working and designing. It's been a beautiful project to work on, really amazing. But FJMT are also amazing at bringing our cultural knowledge and stories to life. So that helps a lot. And this whole process of connecting with country, it's very like, it's a great like professional learning development, right? On a personal level, to know these things about where you're from and the country you're on, the history, the contemporary uses, who's here now, what's going on now. There's so much out there that I think most people wouldn't know even was happening unless you know where to look and where to go and see and connect. Oh, sorry, you can take a photo of that. And no worries. North Head, these are nearly finished now, actually. These are some lookout sites from up there. But this was about connecting to country there. And one of the most important things there is the little bandicoot. So the bandicoot is extinct across Sydney, except for this one and big like presence colony up there on North Head. It's huge and there's evidence of them everywhere. And so what people don't know about, so the little guy that we call him Baraga is the bandicoot, and Baragula is the name for the sunset. And from up in this southern lookout, the sunset is extraordinary. If anyone's seen it, it is beautiful. And it's what everybody goes there for, to see the sunset. Baragula. Baraga is the animal that is present at the time of Baragula. So that's how these links come in, unless you know that. So that lookout's now called Baragula. Could give you a God complex when you think about naming places, but it's not, I mean, this is not on me as an individual. This is stories from my family and all of us. So that's the southern lookout. And then there was also a northern one, Yiningma, but we can keep, I won't go into too much. There's the 1938 Day of Mourning March. We reenacted it with some students, had a great time, but yeah, looked at the politics of space and, you know, like these people weren't allowed to walk in the front door. They had to walk up the back door, the back steps. It's very involved. It's all about the margins. It's an incredible story on a world scale even, because this happened. This is a protest that happened over 20 years before Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks and everybody that we know of from other places. But nobody knows that this happened, or very few know or understand what happened here in Sydney in 1938. And it was a protest, obviously, for a day of mourning on the 26th of January. So people like to say that we just made it up now, that we don't like the 26th of January, but it's been going on for a long time. It's just no one's been listening. And so we you know, one of the, the files are littered with things that you don't win, right? But we actually love doing these things. So there was a project that we were going for near the War Memorial on Liverpool Street. You may wonder what this has to do with library design, but I'm going to get there. And so these buildings were being redesigned. What people didn't realize, so at the back of this space, there was a bit of a pocket park and the laneway. And guess what was just down the laneway? The back doors that my great-grandparents had to walk up to get into Australia Hall on Elizabeth Street there. And so it was just the perfect story of the warriors of our resistance here and the warriors of your resistance there. And this conversation that could be had, you know, this two-way and this space, this reflective space here that you can create. And it was actually quite quiet back there, like you're in Liverpool Street, like it's the middle of the city, but thinking about those ideas. And so this was some of the renders from that, and allowing country to breathe again in this place, and sort of real country, not hyper landscaped country, preferably. We're pretty against introduced species for the most part. The only thing I can really get my head around, I love the idea of fruit trees, and that people could just eat from walking down the street, that there's free food available. That's what country is about. You shouldn't have to pay for resources from country. Unfortunately, a lot of people take more than they need. Way more, a lot more. So it's a difficult thing to do now, is to be able to let country provide however it provides. I'll probably skip on past this. This is a bit of a, it was testing the limits of City of Sydney have a clause now, a bylaw that says leave Aboriginal people alone. They can enact culture however they want within the City of Sydney bounds. And so that could be busking. It could be having a smoking ceremony. It could be doing whatever. It was literally, actually, it was quite strange because it was just a couple of months before that whole thing happened with the statues. And we would have got in some awful, awful trouble if it was at the same time. I'd like to see that one go to court though. Okay. This was, yep. Oh, good. I'm going to start wrapping up. Oh, man, country. Okay. Kinship is important. You'll notice this is all sort of coming under some categories. I just want to jump to one of my favorite. I like this one too. It's poetry in the ground at Sydney Olympic Park. You know, think about every single surface, every single part, our stories, our knowledge, but country especially, like time is running out. This, you know, we need to prioritize country in any way we can. And it's got to come before the bottom line dollar as well, because too long now we've been putting money first. And I think we're starting to realize that we can't eat, drink or breathe money. You know, Albanese, I love him, but he said a few months ago, we can't put plants before people. But they keep you alive. You have to put them before people or we're all gone. So I'm like, I just don't think people are getting it. Now, I loved doing this job. This was a gentleman's library in the Museum of Sydney. So a very conservative, very colonial. It's on the location of the very first government house. And it's very incredibly colonially based building. What they wanted though was a space where they could have Indigenous education. And this was our first job ever as Bangawarra. And it just so happened that because I've been in education for a long time, I've been running programs for a long time. So they saw us to do the space. And then I happened to say, did you know that I can do all this as well? So we got to write education programs and everything for this whole space. And it was awesome, but it was a learning curve. Biggest thing I learned was don't ever show the client anything you don't like yourself. Because I didn't like that painting that ended up on the carpet. I liked other ones, but that one slipped through. And then, oh, we like that one. Damn. So the other ones were better. But it's a printed carpet. And I know it's funny. The idea is, though, that you're in the middle of the city, you have students coming from everywhere. Where's country? And so we've recreated a campsite. It's around Aboriginal pedagogies of being able to lay down and learn together in a circle. There's no sage on the stage. And so there's a stellarium, and that speaks to different constellations in the sky. And there's an audio that we did of me telling the stories of that. So the students can lay down and look, and it's about, you know, there's the fire and the earth and the water and, you know, thinking about these different ways that we do things. It's not just about what something looks like, but it's about how do we act in these spaces? How does it perform? How do we perform when we're there? How can we create spaces that actually speak to and with country? Another classic one of that. That's another long story. I probably should end there, but this is Ancestral Stories and the most contemporary robot cooker arm, 3D printing clay and clay mud. This is down in the mud, Sydney Olympic Park, one country. And it just, yeah, it's telling the stories, but through the mud, literally and figuratively. I don't know if because there's so many rabbit holes to go down. And I mean, it's just difficult. What can I say to fit everything in? Is there anything that I should have thrown in that I didn't? What did you talk about this morning? Is there anything I should say? The whole world. It's like that. I could just talk forever. But you've got such a beautiful role in understanding how country can, you know, meaningfully be included in spaces that can then lead to conversations, to research, to other things. We're working on a library at the moment where we've got a big problem. There's mermaid pools down in Southwest and people are dying there. We have a story that belongs there, our ancestral stories of Mikidan, who female fish, mermaid spirit, but fish head, human legs. And what happened in the story was people took too many fish, destroyed the fish stock there, which were her children. She retaliated, killed the men. It sounds terrible, it's awful, right? The problem is that now when men go there and swim, they will die. So there's been 13 deaths of men, 1 death of a woman. And we can't get this story out enough. It's an incredibly dangerous place and we don't want people to die there. And in the library, we've now got the opportunity to showcase that story and be able to tell the story to even to the little ones, you know, with some obviously appropriate discretion. But from the very youngest age, they will know because it's the teenagers that are going there and being silly and getting killed. And so the library is an important space where a lot of the community will come together and be able to read and be informed of things that you may not be able to inform them of out there on country or on the natural parts of country. And now remember, when you're connecting with country, you are country. You are country. It's not the natural versus the built anymore. We are the natural world. We are country. So remember that. Connecting with country is connect to yourself. We all know how great it feels when we go out there and connect with country, right? And that's what we need to do. Let's even the balance a bit between the concrete. People talk about green corridors. I talk about grey corridors. I'd like it all to be green with some grey corridors in it. Not all grey with some green corridors. And stick to the endemic plants and species, not just native, but endemic to that spot that you're at, because that then supports ecologies, habitats, things that are already there needing support. I could just go on for hours. I'm so sorry. You can follow me on LinkedIn. And if you want any more information, we have a chapter in a book about the very first line that we ever worked with. Somebody from the government architect said, what do you think about the idea of site? And I said, it's not a site, it's a song line. So that's how our chapter starts. So think about it that way and think about country as an entity, as a person. That's what I've been raised with. And once you realize that everything's connected and everything you do to country, you're doing to yourself and to your children and to your loved ones and to the future, you start to think very differently. I could keep talking for hours, but I won't.
Music to our
Oh. Thank you all so much. Jadi guru. Jadi guru kawana mea. Thank you for remembering our ancestors today. So,
Does anyone have a question to Shannon before we move on?
ooh,
That corner?
yes, hello.
Just wait for
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. It was a wonderful talk. I guess, what would you say the biggest misconception you come across about country from white fellas would be?
Probably that country is just landscaping, plants that you choose. And that, or anything with country is just doing a standard consultation process. And that process is actually probably pretty racist because it assumes that there's nobody of any sort of qualification that could sit at the table from the word go. So there needs to be a reshuffling. It's a top question. They're probably my top three things. And that, oh, this is the city, there is no country, who cares? What do you mean? You know? And it's like, no. There's plenty of ways to reverse, plenty of ways to go back and do it better and do it properly. And it can be done for a lot of other reasons. So why can't it be done for country? The very thing that keeps us alive. If it can be done because Foxtel wants a bigger satellite, then it could be done because we want a bigger tree. So, because they keep us alive. And it's not just landscaping. It's the orientation of buildings, it's windows, it's where are things at? Some great things I've seen is, you know, some of the things we've been working on is like creating in the wall of the building a divot and plantings that are important within those divots. And then the first thing they say is, well, what happens if the tree dies? There's a divot there, you better fill it. Like, you know, you build for country, yeah? And you build so it can't be replaced. Janet Lawrence told me a great one, which she puts trees in her art. And so then they can't be cut down. They're part of the copyright and IT, the IP and everything for like 50 odd years or more. So there's trees that, oh, we want to get rid of these casuarinas. No, part of my artwork, they've got to stay. There's another good way of doing it. Sorry. Yes, there's another one over here.
Hi, I'm
really
Nicholas. I'm from University Infrastructure here at UCID.
Yeah.
I got a question. How do you think about First Nations in like a master planning sort of framework?
Yeah.
Because I see a lot of examples just on particular buildings and on sites, but what about the bigger picture?
Yeah, there you go. There's one. Well, I don't even know if we're allowed to show this yet, but here we are. Yeah, no, I'll go back to that. Yeah, we do master planning and all that kind of thing too. And actually, we find at the master planning stage, it's even better because there's none of that attitude of like, oh, it's already done, it's already set. No. You start from scratch and you go out there on that green field or whatever, and you can just go crazy. And it's amazing the ways in which people are very open and keen to accommodate country and the meaningful parts of country. And you can see, look, these online, probably not that one yet. Oh, we're here. Oops. I wouldn't normally do that. I don't think it's not allowed to be seen. So yeah, but Blackwattle Bay and Bays West are online. You can look at them and pick them apart, but you'll see how we do it in the master planning. And it's fantastic. It's even better than just because the idea of borders and, you know, like country doesn't know borders, water doesn't know borders, air, smoke, fire, they don't know borders. So to be able to have master plan a huge precinct is really the best way of going. It's
quite long way through.
Yeah.
And just turned it around. It's extraordinary. I mean, really, just having that knowledge.
Yeah.
And understanding the character of that country.
yeah.
Made all the difference, you know. So we had a series of maybe 6 principles that just turned all the options around in terms of, you know, women's business and casuarinas and so many different parts of it that just were so
I even forget that we came into it so much later in the piece.
Yeah.
And actually the people that brought us in, they end up getting sort of like sidelined and saying, okay, we're finished with you now, but we're going to continue on over here, and called us back, Infrastructure New South Wales. And it was great. It was a fantastic project. Sorry.
Thank you, Shannon. I love the way you interweaved everything. You made it really circular, and something over here, then something over there. It just was, I loved it. But just a quick question. I'm representing Coffs Harbour Libraries, so Bumbangi country. Yes, and I really I love the wording of so many things that you're bringing up. Could you repeat the one you mentioned about the spatial? You said
spatial implications of country.
Loved it. Thank you.
No, that's okay. That's just one of if they're gonna laugh when I say they like that. There's one down the back there. Yeah, spatial implications. Yeah, our chapter. I'm trying to find a way to get our chapter so I can share it on LinkedIn, because it'll have a lot of lines like that in it.
Thanks so much, Shannon, for your time. This is just like a pie in the sky question, or like how long is a piece of string, but how can we do acknowledgement of country better?
Yeah.
So from the perspective of when we verbally give it, but also in our environment, in our design, when we think about country, not just being a Western construct.
Yeah. Well, when I think of acknowledgement of country, I seriously mean, let's think about country and acknowledge country. And so my favorite one was the one for Cutaway. It was like this channel of like, you know, 400 million years ago, a river ran here and all the sandstone was deposited and it was fused and then it was eroded and worn down and all of it, you know, it's just this like amazing, like think about country as it is in its natural state and talk about that. This is country that knows fresh water, salt water, this or that, or whatever it is. And then say, and we'd like to acknowledge the people who have cared for this place for thousands of years, including, and there should never be just one name, never. And so you should say like, so for here in Sydney, I say, yes, I'm Dharawal, traditional owner here, absolutely. But I'm part of a huge kinship system that also includes Daru, Eora, Gundungura, Gai Maragal, Goringai, like, you know, the list can go on. And then I also say, and all of the others in our kinship system here, there's no one people, one place, one language. It's just not relevant. It's not cool anymore to be talking like that. So don't ever say, I'd like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people. And keep going, a little bit harder, ask around, find out. But I always put country first, and anyone can write that about country. This is freshwater country under the Port Jackson figs. We find our library and and you know, this country has always been a place where we learn and where we teach and where we understand. We listen to the women and we you know, so that can be acknowledged and done by anybody, because this is your country too. And what you know and what you connect to, you'll love and you'll protect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shannon. We have to move on.
Yes, please. I'm so
Hopefully
sorry.
you can stay for this next session because
I will.
see what previous we've got. And as she's coming over, I just very quickly introduce friend and colleague Kim Taunga from Aotearoa. And Kim is very important because she is the president of the association, the Librarians Association in New Zealand. So she's a great, as well as an important player in our profession. She's also a great inspiration to in Aotearoa. So over to you, Kim.
Oh, kia ora, Philip.
Kia ora. I would like to begin today by acknowledging the people who have cared for this place for thousands of years, your kin, in this beautiful country, and pay my respects to your elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal Torres Strait Island people here today. Kia ora, Shannon. Ko te amarangi ki mua, ko te hapai uki muri, ina mana, ina reo, ina
Raurangatira mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Arai Konga tōku mitua tāne, ko Patricia tōku mitua vāini, no Rarotonga e Mangaia mai tōku papa, no Ireland mai tōku mama, ko Kim Taunga tōku ingoa. Ko Aotearoa Pauarahi Community Delivery ki te Tonga, ko Ahau te Perehitini o te Rohinga o Aotearoa. Kia ora. I just did my welcome in Māori as well, and just greetings to everyone. And also said in Cook Island Māori that my dad is from Rarotonga and Mingaia in Cook Islands, and my mum's from Ireland. And in terms of work, I am the community manager, head of Community Delivery South for Takona Hira o Tāmaki Makaurau, Auckland Council. And also, as Philip mentioned, the president of the Library and Information Association, New Zealand, Aotearoa. Kia ora. My thanks to the fabulous IFLA LBES section for welcoming me here today, particularly Philip, Margie and Marion. And so when I introduce myself, I'm acknowledging that I am not Māori. I'm here to speak about Aotearoa, New Zealand, and some stuff that's going on in my part of the library world. But my whakapapa is Cook Island Māori and Irish, although born in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So, and as I said, I'm wearing a couple of eikatu, my presidential hat. Oh, eikatu is the flower garland that Cook Island wear. And also my Auckland Council job hat. So that is who I am, and I'm here to tell you just a little story about a little library that we have in Takaanini. And I will find the thing that turns the slides on. Te Paataka Koorero o Takaanini. As this is a libraries, building and equipment seminar, I will just tell you quickly about the project, but that's not really what I'm here to talk about as such, and from a project point of view. This project began in 2008. It's been a long journey. It's 625 square meters, the library. It's actually a leased building. We didn't do the base build, we just did fit out. The base build was done by Ignite Architects, and Pacific Environments was our lead architect. But I'm going to tell you about how we have done, made a whānau, that means family in Te Reo Māori New Zealand, a whānau bilingual Reo Rua, two languages, library, and some key features of the inclusive whānau-centric design. But I also would like to, with my president's hat on, just acknowledge that and there's a first reference to the needs of Māori and library and information work in 1963, 60 years ago, in one of the publications when the Library Association was working with the Māori Services Committee. So 60 years ago. So where we've been for the last 60 years is a topic of another talk, but I just would like to acknowledge that 60 years of mahi, or work, that librarians in New Zealand have done. And I work for Takona Hira o Tāmaki Makaurau, so Auckland Council. And we are an organisation that honours our commitments to the treaty, to Te Reti or Waitangi. And this is articulated through a number of key strategic documents. The reason I'm mentioning this is because we sometimes forget that everything's steeped. There's steeped in the, like, we have done a lot of mahi since Auckland Council began in 2010, and we've got a number of base documents that we're kind of used to working with as staff. And they are things such as the Auckland Plan 2050, which in Focus Area 7 says, since 1840, Māori identity and design has been minimised in the Auckland landscape. Through Māori design and mātauranga Māori, that's Māori knowledge, must be placed at the centre of planning, design and development. So that's our big Auckland strategic plan. In Auckland, the Auckland Council has also signed up to acknowledge the Te Aranga design principles, which were developed by Māori design professionals in response to actually a New Zealand urban design panel in 2005. but those Tāʻaranga principles are Māori values based. I'm just going to tell you some words and I'm going to come back to them. So rangatiratanga, kaitiakitanga, manaakitanga, wairuatanga, kotahitanga, whanaungatanga, and mātauranga. We've also got in Auckland the Te Reo Māori policy. We are partners with the Independent Māori Statutory Board. We've got a lot of base, for our work. So we feel really supported in that space working for Te Kaunihira or Tāmaki Makaurau. So I will just show you some pictures now. This is the Takaanini Library. This is just an external shot of the base build that we didn't build. This is some nice pictures. It was a project. We had some architects, we had some building going on. We've got a floor plan. However, where are we? There's a very average map of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Just so, for those of us who, have I got a pointer? Auckland sort of, Tāmaki Makaurau is kind of there. And here is our very standard map of Auckland as according to council. So all those little things there are the local boards. We've got 21 local boards and 1 governing council. And the area we're talking about is within the Paataka local board area. However, well, it's not really, well, it is a however. What actually matters is this map. So in Auckland, there are 19 mana whenua. We acknowledge 19 mana whenua groups. And we recognise and work with 19 mana whenua groups. Annie mentioned mana whenua had a lovely, what the word means, which is basically iwi and hapu, which are tribes and sub-tribes with ancestral relationships to areas of Tāmaki Makaurau and exercise customary authority over those areas. We also work with and acknowledge Mātāwaka. There's a large number of urban Māori whose tribal connections are not within Tāmaki Makaurau. We also, of course, acknowledge and work with them, and I'll talk a bit later. We also, and that includes Māori organisations and whānau Māori families, basically, or whānau, yeah. So, as I said, there's 19 anywhere. If I was better at PowerPoint, I could overlay all the 19. However, even in the Papakura area, or not even, but in the Papakura area, there are at least 10 iwi who acknowledge a mana whenua to that area. Where the way we worked with this project, there's a mana whenua forum. We go and explain the project and say, essentially, not who is interested in helping us, it's who would like to lead on this, and mana whenua talk amongst themselves, just to say, actually, we'll come to the table with this one, but at the same time, we have to absolutely talk to all 10 mana whenua groups, but in this particular instance, the leads were Te Akatai Wai Ohua and Ngāti Tama Oho. So acknowledging particularly those 2 iwi for this project. As well as that, we have done a lot of engagement work. Karanga atu, karanga mai means hear the call, and what I would also like to acknowledge, there's a whole lot of engagement work done too. So karanga atu, karanga mai. Now, these words that I've mentioned before come up again in karanga atu, karanga mai. So these are important Māori values. Wairuatanga, the intergenerational links, rangatiratanga is the integrity around, it describes integrity of people, purpose and place. Kaitiakitanga, stewardship, guardianship, it's holistically how things are connected. Manaakitanga is often kind of referred to as hospitality, but it's really how we care for people in space and acknowledging them. And whanaungatanga and whakawhanaungatanga is relationship building. So also mentioned as the Tāʻaranga design principles. So when we use karanga atu, karanga mai for our engagement purposes, where it's all completely based or values based on these values, which are very important. back to the not very good shot of the front door of Te Paataka Koorero or Takanini, but why I'm showing you this is because you'll notice Te Paataka Koorero or Takanini. So there's a couple of things here. The Paataka, you notice there's a double A. So Māori has either macrons to emphasize the whichever vowel it is, or this, the Te Akatai iwi group, their dialect is to double A, where the macron sometimes is in other places. So, and very importantly, Takanini is actually the name of one of their ancestors, Ihaka Takanini. And so when we met, when we were actually Kathleen, who you'll see a photo of in a moment, who was there at the table with us, she said, if you do one thing in this build, can you please spell my ancestor's name correctly? So Takanini, but you'll see on any other map of Aotearoa, I can't even say it properly. Anyway, it's supposed to say Takanini. I can't say it the wrong way, but that's spelt differently on pretty much every other map, except if you're on the train from Auckland Transport, who have also changed. That's part of us as well, who've also changed the kōrero, the talking on the train. It says Takanini correctly as well. And I think, interestingly, it wasn't a gift of a name, because it was a gift of a name, and they're allowing us to use that name because just outside well, you can't see it, but there's a thing that says Takanini Village. So Kathleen was not worried. She's worried about the fact that it says Takanini on the sign that says the shopping centre, because this was a safe, we've created a safe space for her ancestors' name to be used correctly. And so she was absolutely happy with it being used within, and all the dialect of all the naming of places within the space to use their dialect. Wasn't really fussed about the sign outside, didn't matter. This was about this space here. So she did a lovely kōrero about that at the opening. Oh, and now I just show you some pictures of our opening. So this is Kathleen Wilson from Te Akatai, who I'm referring to, and Kaimātua Ted Ngātaki from Ngāti Tamaoho. So, relationships take ages. I happen to have known Ted for, I don't know, for about 20 years. And the conversation you've had over the years, and it's just whanaungatanga, the relationship building is super important. There is also, this is just a pohatu, just a rock, but not a Māori stone as such, which is more the one that holds the spirit of a place. This, we were happy they gave us the pohatu, but and they're the story of the chief, of their ancestor, and the chief, which they wrote on the plaque, was also unveiled on the opening day. So that also speaks to their ancestor. Oh, there's all the words. I mentioned the use of the dialect to name spaces. Te Puna Mātauranga, Tāne Te Wānanga, I can see it on here, and Te Wainui Tāne, which also speaks to the artwork which is within the space. I'll get to that soon. Oh, there's Ted speaking. This is just kind of this just really showing. So when we work with mana whenua in Auckland, we're used to, them being there at blessings, at the, there's Ted talking, Kathleen talking, that's the then mayor, he also spoke. And we're sort of used, we're absolutely used. We always have a dawn karakia. This is everyone gathering for the blessing, and also sod turning. We keep the sod, we put it away safely, and the building is built. And then we always have a dawn blessing before the kaimahi or the workers, and we're all kaimahi. It's not a hierarchical thing. This is mana whenua happening as this, and we're used to. That's like what we do all the time. But what I'm trying to get to very soon is that is the most basic thing that we do, and very, very important and ceremonial. But sometimes we've been, like that's the last we see of the iwi, and I'm exaggerating slightly it's a slightly hyperbole, but it can happen. So here, though, we had Kathleen, our iwi representatives on the project control group. We had them choosing architects. We had them on staff, because this was a new build, so we didn't have any other staff to bring in. We had to build a whole new team. They were part of the recruitment process, and anything else they wanted to be involved in, we just, and that I could tell a long story about what procurement actually thought of that, because, but I won't. Because it's unusual basically to have iwi at the table all the way along and part of the decision making. There's also some very clever people in Auckland who work as part of the Southern Initiative, which is, and we've worked with them a lot. They've got super bright social enterprise, amazing people who have done a whole lot of work with us. And one of the outcomes, and I've got a lovely bibliography, which I can get at the end. So all these documents are available. But creating home was part of the other thing that we had gatherings on marae, talking to matawaka and mana whenua, and what came out was 5 minimums of creating a home away from home in our libraries. This sounds really basic, but it actually isn't. So all we need is a welcoming space, a safe place for tamariki, that's children, a place to change baby, accessible kitchen facilities, and opportunities to connect with or just be around others. Sounds basic, right? However, I don't know that it is, because I don't know why. Well, it should be a bit easier. Okay, I'll get back to creating home in a second. This is just another example of this. Is you notice that Kathleen's in there with a high-vis vest, so she was totally part of the walking the space, having a conversation. And what we were doing there actually is having a conversation about that blue and white bit there. So there's a blank wall. When we're staring at it, we're running out of time. No one has decided what to do with the blank wall. It's because it's a design build in a lease space. At one point it was all glass and there was going to be something else upstairs, but we've ended up 3 weeks to go and there's blank white wall. And so everyone's sort of staring at it, thinking, shall we do a community artwork? Could we do someone suggested a mirror ball or something? And Kathleen said, well, could you just please put a map of the place with with correct names on it? Yes, there's an idea. So the other architect, they were brilliant. The architect went, fine, we can make that happen in seriously not very long. And so I think it's one of the most best things, about the space. So everything's spelled right. Takaanini Library, which is another area of which we have a library, and that has also changed the name from Clendon to Waimahia properly. Kind of again a bit of a side thing is we also have Te Kiti Rukuruku, which is a cultural and identity program within Auckland Council that collects and tells unique stories of Tāmaki Makaurau, so that te reo Māori can be seen, heard, learned and spoken. So that contributes to reclaiming Māori identity and restoration of mana and Māori, which is Māori as life force, to the whenua, which is land, through the restoration of te reo Māori and traditional names and assorted narratives. Now that's a sort of an aside to Kiti Rukuruku, but our libraries are part of that. And it's a long process getting the stories, and it's not about signage and naming and changing signs as such. It is about all that I just said. And so this is also part of telling the stories of the whenua, the land, through particularly this map. We also, there is iwi wanted to tell stories of that, a cultural narrative that meant something to this iwi, Tāne and the Baskets of Knowledge, which is quite a common story in Aotearoa, where Tāne went and got baskets of knowledge, sort of a long story actually. Anyway, and then he eventually got back down and bought the baskets of knowledge and put them in a sacred storehouse. So the iwi, the artist Johnson Witihira is the artist that works with Te Akatai Ohua. And if you are in Tāmaki Makaurau, you'll have seen the motifs along the motorway. There's a number of artworks that he has done, which are throughout that area of Tāmaki Makaurau. And so The artwork is embedded as part of the cultural narrative within the space. So that's just a different view of them. I'm trying to show you some architectural shots as well. Okay, this is a kitchen. So kai, which is food. Sorry, kai is a great connector. One of the things is accessible kitchen facilities. So what we made as an accessible kitchen facility was a kitchen right in the middle of the library. So you can't, is there a shot where you can, so if you come in the door there and that's the kitchen there, I might just go back. Oh, and then that's some, architectural shots of no people. Hold on, I'll go back. But the kitchen. So the kai, so in that space, it's completely public. So you can, it's also fully fitted out. So you can make a kai and the staff all eat there. The community bring in food. There's always food there. You can just go in and get a kai anytime you want, and it's all sharing. We also do some back of the fridge cooking lessons, and community come in, and the other day I was there and a woman was there making dumplings, and just because she kind of felt like it. And there's no rule. I mean, the place is a values-based, not policy and rules kind of place. So I'll get to I've already mentioned some of the values, but I'll get to that as well. So this is like the center of a library and the center of the space, because it is like creating a home. You need some people in this picture. However, hopefully you get the idea. There's another shot of it. Yes. Oh, yes, sure. Other aspects of the build. Parenting room. This is where absolutely open. It's got it's actually got a little microwave as well. You can change baby and look after tamariki, and it's actually kind of just there. It's right in the library, and that's really well used. There's a slide, and it can be noisy or it cannot be noisy, but whānau and community, they keep we don't tell people to be quiet. For community, it's how the community wants to use the space is how we kind of control the slide. And there's a beautiful picture. We have some gaming stuff. We have a consultants room. I will just quickly speak to the recruitment process. I've spoken to it before, but we had bespoke position descriptions, which is also another long story of how we actually got that through PNC by kind of hook and by crook, and a kaupapa Māori recruitment process. So just quickly on that, we got everyone who is wanted to work at Takaanini into a room with the managers and whoever else was there, some whānau, some iwi, and we just had some whanaungatanga, and everyone went around and talked about why they wanted to work at Takaanini and why we were there and how we were all involved in it. And then essentially we did have a kind of, it wasn't really an interviews, but then we talked to people a little bit more individually, and that's how we chose our awesome team. And you didn't have to be able to, the seniors speak to Reo Māori, but it was really just around attitude to language. So people spoke in whatever their language was around the table, and we got an awesome team together who have now, oh, there they are. There's some of them. I'll just flip. Everything's rooted in Indigenous practice. I won't go, but again, the values-based. The one other kind of cool thing is that there is no workroom. So there's no workroom in this library. Kai mahi, they just hang out in the library. Could be in that space, could be in that space. Could be in that space. And probably just finally, so what that does is, so they just work out, put their laptops, just hang out, have meetings, and community can join if they want to. So there's programming. We've got lots of examples where the staff are talking about what they could do, what we could do in the library, and the community just join in and have the kōrero straight away. We get the feedback straight away, what's happening. They leave laptops just in the library. There's no security gates or security here. We sometimes do use guards in South Auckland, not at this space. It's embraced by community, and it's kaupapa Māori. It's all about whānau, and the whānau is the community and the staff, kai mahi, who work there. So even though we love buildings, the centre Ko te whānau te pau, tōku manawa o te whare. This whare, the central heart pole of the building, is the family. So it isn't all about the whare for sure. Kia ora.
We've got time for one or two questions. We do have an afternoon tea break, so you can also talk, hopefully, to Shannon and Kim during the afternoon tea break with some of your personal questions, but maybe one or two questions to share with the whole group. Yes, at the back.
Thank you so much. I guess I'm trying to think of the way to word this. So I work for the State Library here. Melissa and I work in the Black branch at the State Library, so the little black bit within the colonial bit. And we work with a lot of public libraries and other libraries that are trying to do things like this. And it always strikes me that part of the issue here is that we don't have very many of our mob in positions of authority, let alone staffing a whole library. And so we kind of get stuck in this place where we're trying to explain these values in a way that can then be kind of enacted without us. I was just wondering, have you had experience setting all of this up for the non-Maori people to run those spaces, or do you think that having Maori staff is really key to it?
Kia ora, kia ora. Well, the other bit I was going to say is we have got another program called Kia ora te whānau, where we're doing a Kia ora te whānau hub in another one of our sites. But it's not repeatable. You have to do this, go through the entire same story and with the iwi that matter. And it's taken us forever. We have got a Te Waka Kirawai, a Māori unit in Auckland within our department now. But that's taken us 12 years. We had a Māori principal advisor forever and on our lead team, but she didn't have any staff. We had kaimahi at relatively junior positions out in the libraries, and finally we just went, basically, we're going to bring that staff in, that staff into they're not going to be dotted around. We've given up on that. We're going to bring them into Te Waka Kirawai, wrap around them, and then it's just far more effective. So and our staff just keep getting poached to other places. So it's taken us this whole 13 years of being in Auckland Council to get this amazing group. I should also mention that we have an awesome Ngā Matarai, a Māori unit within Council as well. But for our department with libraries and art centres and community centres, we achieved that in July 2021. So it felt like a biggie that Judith and I had been around that long, that working on that. So I think the answer is just kind of keep going and keep recruiting. And it's been 60 years in Aotearoa, etc.
Sounds like you're making some progress, but I know how you feel. One more. Yes.
Really proud to say that I lived in Auckland for 20 years. I'm just basically from India, who moved in 1996 to Auckland, and I stayed there for 20 years and working with Auckland libraries. I just want to share this response to that question. When I started working in Auckland with Auckland City Libraries, all the new recruits were introduced to the document.
Yeah.
And then we had to go through, all the councils here, we go through the code of conduct courses. It's something like that. Every staff member who starts working there was introduced to the Maori culture and the main principles of Maori. So it's really good to get to understand what it is and how it is, what the importance is. So that actually pushes you to enjoy the culture and to be able to actually provide the services necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're having a break now, but if you do want to quickly grab Shannon or Kim or Annie, who's back, please do. Thank you.